Here we're going to have a look at three metals. They are lithium, sodium and potassium. And one thing you might notice straight away is that they're all stored in bottles with oil in there. This is liquid paraffin, and that is to protect them from the atmosphere, to protect them from water in the atmosphere or even the oxygen in the atmosphere. So let's start with the first of them, which is lithium, element number 3. It's the lightest of the metals. And I'll take a little bit of lithium out of it. There's a lithium rod. And as you can probably see, it's a very dark grey metal. If I try to cut it, I've got a scalpel here that I'm going to try to cut it with. You can see that it is quite hard. But with a little bit of pressure, I can cut the end, and you can see that lithium is quite a shiny metal. So I'm going to use that piece, so we're going to put that one back. Lithium's become quite famous in recent years because lithium is what's in the batteries that keep your laptop computer running or keep your smartphone going. Lithium provides the energy. So there's a little piece of lithium, and it's covered in oil, so before we do any chemistry with it, we need to remove that oil. So I'm just going to dab it with the paper towel, and that will help to remove most of the oil. Move it to a different part, and then we can have a look to see what the chemistry is. So the chemistry we're going to do is just to put it into some water. So we'll have a look to see what happens when we put lithium into water. So we have a trough of water. Here's our sample of lithium, and we're just going to drop that into the water and have a look to see what happens. The first thing you may notice is that it floats. It's on the surface of the water, and it's bubbling and fizzing around, and we can see some vapour coming off it. So there's obviously a gas that's being produced, and it's gradually getting smaller and smaller as the lithium will dissolve completely in the water. So lithium is quite a reactive metal. So let's now move on to the next one, which is sodium. Sodium is the next metal down in the first group of the periodic table. First group of the periodic table is called the alkali metals. So lithium is the first one. We've finished with that. We don't need that one anymore. And we're going to look at this one, which is sodium. So let's take the top off and see if we've got some sodium in here. So let's find a lump of sodium. Again, it's stored under oil, so it's going to be covered in oil. So there's the lump of sodium. We're not going to use a lump of sodium that big. Again, with my scalpel, this time you'll see it's much easier to cut through. When I cut through it, it's a shiny metal, just like the lithium was quite shiny, but begins to tarnish over quite quickly. So I'll put that back into the water. So now I'm just going to cut myself a little piece of sodium. Any bits that I don't use, I put back into the oil. Okay, so I've got a nice piece of sodium there, but just like the lithium, I need to remove the oil from the surface so that it can react. And I do that just by dabbing it with a piece of dry paper towel and just moving it to another clean piece and removing any oil that's on the surface. It has tarnished over a little bit, and that's what we're going to use, and we're going to drop it into some water. So here's the piece of sodium, and we're ready to drop that into the water. Let's drop it in. Again, it floats on the surface. This time the reaction's a little bit faster. You might be able to tell that it's turned into a ball. It's actually melted. Sodium melts at nearly 100 degrees Celsius, so it's turned into a liquid. It's reacting very vigorously with the water. and producing a gas. You might be able to hear the buzzing as the gas is being given off, the bubbles are being formed, and that gas is in fact hydrogen. Okay, so it's nearly finished now. So the last bit dissolves. So the last bit of the sodium will dissolve in the water and we'll have sodium hydroxide solution. And there it goes. Right, the next one is potassium. So we've gone down the group 1 elements. So the top one is lithium, and we've got sodium, and now we're going to have a look at the next one, which is potassium. So here's some potassium again. It's stored under oil, so we need to get a piece of potassium out. There's a piece of potassium. We use the scalpel to cut a little piece off. Very easy to cut, but again, it did briefly give me a shiny surface, but that shiny surface has tarnished over. So we'll put that back before it has time to react with the air, any that we're not using. And you might be able to tell I've chosen a smaller piece this time. But just like before, I need to remove the oil. So I'm just going to dab it with the paper towel. Move it over to a clean piece of paper towel, dab it again, just to remove any oil that's on the surface. Okay, so now we're going to take this small piece of potassium and put it into the water and see what happens. This time I've introduced a safety screen between, this is a plastic screen here, so that if anything dangerous happens, I and the camera are protected. So from the safety of the screen, behind the screen, I'm now going to place the potassium into the water. So I've got to come around the side, and now I'm going to drop the potassium into the water. Okay, ready? And as you can see, a much more vigorous reaction. The potassium floated to start with, but very quickly caught fire. So the bubbles of the gas that were being given off, those are the hydrogen, and it catches fire because it's so hot, the heat that's given off from the reaction. And the purple of the flame is a good indicator that it's potassium. Potassium gives you a lilac colour when it burns. So if you see a lilac flame, it's probably because there's some potassium there. So one thing you should have noticed between lithium, sodium and potassium is that the metals get more reactive as you go down the group. So lithium and potassium, potassium is more reactive. Lithium, sodium, potassium.